how do you begin to organize all of these complex and sometimes conflicting operational challenges so that you can be successful? I developed a program I call MOST, and I'll explain that in more detail. I was a focal for 7 years. I led the Adaptive Instructional Initiative at Arizona State University. We focused on first-year student success. We were working for about 7 years, and it actually started before 2013, looking at administrative processes. But in 2013, we started doing course redevelopment on the academic side, and it continues today. It's actually still underway. I transitioned to my new job in 2020. And over that time, we redesigned 30 different courses. We involved more than 200 faculty members in the process, and we influenced or affected over 100,000 students. So the program was organized around the synergy and collaboration of 4 levels of leadership. We always started with the conversation with the faculty members. We had to convince them that this was in their best interest and in the students' best interest. And I see that question arising quite a bit in the conversations, both with the focals and the champions, about how do we convince faculty. The second group of people I had to convince were department chairs. They had to be supportive in order to give their faculty the green light. We also needed to get our college deans to support the initiative. If the deans weren't talking positively about e-learning, then the department chairs and the faculty would not be supportive. And then finally, the university provost had to make a public commitment and frequently talks about the imperative of implementing e-learning and developing these resources for student success. So I want you to think a little bit about your ecosystem now, and who will you have to convince? While I'm talking, I want you to start a piece of paper and write down all of the major types of people that you would want to convince. I know in some cases you will have external players as well, like a Ministry of Education or an authorizing body that would enable you to offer a new course online. So think about your ecosystem and who do you have to convince to be successful in this e-learning initiative. Now, MOST is an acronym, and it stands for mission. The primary question when I talk about mission is, why do we have this program? There's also objectives. How will we know when we're successful? Strategies. What will we do to achieve our objectives? And tactics. How and when will we do these things? These are the key components of my approach to planning and communication. What I've done, and I developed this model for my own purpose, my own uses, every time I start a new project, I sketch out my MOST method, and I develop a working sheet that I can use when I'm working with colleagues to communicate clearly with them and consistently. We want to communicate consistently over time. So for me, MOST is a strategic planning tool to organize that conversation. It helps me build consensus with my colleagues around what we want to do together. And it helps me communicate clearly with my leadership. And I know that's also come up quite a bit in our conversations about how do we engage with our academic leaders. They're busy people and they don't have a lot of time to spend on these things. So this is one tool that you can consider as part of your portfolio to do that. What I hear all the time are tough questions from my colleagues. When I'm leading initiatives, they'll say, so why do we have an e-learning initiative? They also can be sometimes hostile. Why are we wasting money on this? I'm sure you've had these questions. I like to say that every time I meet another colleague and they ask me about my e-learning initiative, I have to be prepared to answer tough questions. The one that's coming up a lot now is, well, now that the pandemic is starting to ease up, why can't we just go back to teaching in class? And you're going to start to hear faculty members challenge the need for e-learning. So you have to think about these and many other questions that I'm sure you're getting in the context of your planning process. Now, I'm going to give you an example of a MOST that I developed in 2013 and used for 7 years to communicate with hundreds of colleagues at Arizona State University. I started with the big question, why? So why do we have this program? And Arizona State has 8 design aspirations. So for me, it was quite easy to point to our design aspiration to enable student success. I was using that as the primary reason why we started this initiative. And when we use that as our anchor, we have to start to think about, how do we measure student success? For my leadership team, they decided that 90% first-year retention would be our measure of success. When we started in 2012, we had about 83%. And by the end of the program, we were at 90%. So every year, we would have a review of our MOST profile, and we would look at how we were progressing in the success of our mission. For our objectives, we came up with 4 that did not change for the entire program. We had the same mission and the same objectives. Now that's important, because if you are changing mission and changing objectives all the time, it's very hard to measure. So when I think about the first year student success, I think about critical thinking, subject mastery, lower student withdrawal, which is a huge problem at Arizona State University. Some classes have between 30 and 40% withdrawal rates. So students are dropping out without a grade. That's a big problem. And I think about instructor insight. Each of these has also been assigned a metric. So in order to enable student success, we want to do active learning in every class. We want to help 90% of our students get a grade of C or better. In our system, C, B, and A are considered passing grades. We want to reduce the withdrawal rate to under 5%. If we are enabling student success, we are keeping students in class. And we want to be able to identify struggling students by week 2. Each of these metrics I also tracked for 7 years. So we could tell if we were progressing towards our objectives. So for us, the strategies to achieve those included adopting a blended course model. That is our pedagogical and technological model. We want to utilize interactive classroom experiences. Then we wanted to digitize all instructional resources. So for those of you who are thinking about blended model, that is a big part of this, is creating a digital infrastructure to host all of that material. And then we wanted the faculty to emphasize formative assessment. The previous models were heavily geared towards summative assessment, high stakes, and we shifted that culture to much more formative assessment. And finally, the tactics that we adopted were to create collaborative course design teams. These included instructional designers, video producers, faculty members. We used libraries of interactive exercises, a little bit like the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovations in Teaching and Learning is now creating a resource center to share your digital content. That's what we did. We also recorded all of the lectures and placed them in the LMS. That was part of the tactical approach to the blended model. And finally, we implemented online assessment systems. And that was an issue that Raymond raised. how do you do e-assessment? We, as part of our formative assessment strategy, were able to create online assessments that were low stakes, that did not create an incentive to cheat. So students were motivated to do the work, but not to spend all their time trying to cheat. Now, when we did this, we had the data set that we were measuring each semester. And as you can see here, the first semester we implemented the new blended model, our withdrawal rate went from 20% down to less than 2%. What we discovered over time was that the interactive exercises in class were helping the students build stronger social networks. And that was encouraging them to stay in the course. So we were very happy with that outcome. And then, of course, on the positive side, we were able to achieve better than 90% success rate. That's a grade of C, B, or A. We attribute this to having all of our instructional resources online. And what we found is students will watch the video of the lecture multiple times. So this gives them a chance to develop more knowledge and more skills throughout.